They were happily chatting to one another. Celine noticed James walking towards them. "You did a good job with the stock." Hearing the compliment, James smiled in appreciation. "I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Maya told me that there isn't much left inside the pot," he asked her. "We've been slowly going through it while we were awake," Mim said. "Paired with the roasted wolf meat, I think we may need to make this a regular dish during this request." He looked at the others to get their thoughts. Sam nodded. "I think that's a great idea. Though, it doesn't get too cold at night. I still enjoyed the warmth of the liquid. It also worked well as a drink, keeping me hydrated." Naylor raised his spoon and pointed at the pot. "We eventually had to remove the vegetables and limbs of the monsters due to how low the level got. We used the cloth to filter out the stock," Sam said. "It did a good job at clearing out the liquid from the solids, which were all without flavor," Raul said. He grinned at Sam. Sam was curious about the taste of the meat, and his expression was amusing to watch. Sam rolled his eyes. "I was curious. You don't think of meat not having any flavor." He looked at James. "It was all gone. It was like I was eating some kind of flavorless mush." His voice sounded surprised by the experience. James nodded. "Yeah, I've done that before. The vegetables are equally horrible to eat, though I suspect that this time was worse, since I learned that the stock needed far more time than what I gave it before in the past." James unsheathed the dagger, making his way to the wolf still impaled by the branch. The wolf's carcass was picked relatively clean, though there were still places with a lot of meat, barely attached to the bones. Due to how tender the meat was, James didn't need to apply much strength. The blade of the dagger carved out a strip of the meat, which then fell into the bowl. He continued the process of getting more of the meat. It didn't take much time until the bowl was filled with strips of roasted wolf meat. Kate approached the roasted animal and with her hands just grabbed some of the meat off the bones. "It's pretty good even without the stock," she commented with a smile. Leaving behind the others, James moved towards the large pot. He soon saw what they meant when referencing the amount of stock still remaining inside. Taking the spoon placed on top of the pot, he reached inside to get some of the liquid. The spoon tapped the side, causing a metallic sound to ring out. Scooping out the liquid, James added it to the bowl, before going back to get more of the tasty stock. Eventually, the bowl in his hand was filled with not only the meat, but the flavorful liquid. He returned the spoon to the top of the pot. James then walked back to where the others were chatting and eating the remainder of the food. "I see that the steak has all been eaten," James said. Sam grinned. "That was one of the first things that were eaten. It's better to devour those things before they get too cooked." "The preparation on it was good," Naylor grunted, clearly satisfied about the steak. "Glad to hear that," Maya said. "Kate and I worked hard to make sure that even if they got overcooked, that it would still taste decent." She happily said, enjoying the fact that the group had found the steak to be acceptable. "It's also good that it was all eaten. I didn't like the idea of having to carry around the leftovers." "This is true. It's a good thing that we were able to eat both of the wolves that were killed. The first one was eaten pretty quickly with how many of us there are," Mim said. "We buried the other one to let the ground take the nutrients and return what we had taken," Raul said. "The bones would be helpful to the trees around us." Celine nodded at her brother's words. James found it interesting to hear the elves talk about their beliefs. He hadn't had much of a chance to talk to elves during his time as an adventurer, so he found it educational to listen to them. It was clear that the two siblings had a lot of life experiences before they came to the city and joined up with the guild.